Do you need a Harlo build with the highest damage potential, best team utility, while being full endgame ready, which yes does include being able to output oof, and that's to painful damage, where the game can't even tell you how much damage you're actually doing, and yes, this is on the highest rank UVHM 5, absolutely destroy endgame bosses, from vaults to dungeons to what have you, then I got the Harlo build for you. What's up, Worldstopia here, back in with another video. Today we're checking out all things Borderlands 4. Okay, so yes, if you stuck through me, I have basically been doing the green build tree, and I have optimized this through multiple iterations to what I now think, while grinding through all UVHM ranks solo, that I have found the perfect build with the best optimization route. Utilizing several tactics, we keep it quite universal here where you can use any single weapon. However, I do have one specific skill point that I will explain placed differently as it pertains to a singular weapon, but you don't have to utilize that one, and I'll give you a side recommendation. Okay, so we'll get into the actual skill tree, then we'll go into my endgame setup, the weapon I'm using, and other current weapons that do work better with this build. However, as I mentioned, it is completely universal, so any weapon of choice will work. Then we'll get into the specializations and how those tie into everything. So first off here, let's get into the actual skill tree. Now, as usual, I'm going to go ahead and reset my skill tree here so you can go ahead and follow along. Okay, so yes, we have reset our entire skill tree here. I'm going to go over each one, what to prioritize right away, and what is just best for your build in general. First off here, we have to get past this first row, but we actually have a pretty good one here called Momentum. This is going to go ahead and help increase your crit damage, so we are going to pop that up to 505. Next up here, this has been a controversial choice for me, but I do believe this one does output the highest damage, and it does have the best stacking ability. This one isn't very auto. I will go into some other abilities that you can toy into, but I would still take this one no matter what, as I believe main's hum is just not utilized, and you're still going to survive, especially even on UVHM, and especially if you do the setup that I take. So we are going to do 505 in it, especially over main's hum, but that's your decision there. You can swap if you are doing the overshield build. I'll explain a little bit later. Next up here, if you are doing the overshield build, go ahead and put 2 in creative flow. I'll explain what the overshield build is in a bit, but I have actually toyed away from that because the uptime to me feels a bit slow. I can go ahead and show you here where the shield actually drops off me quite quick. I even have a rip kit to kind of tie into it. I also have a class mod that helps with it, although I do recommend having these abilities and passives and try to get them on a class mod, as you will need it for survivability, as Harlo does lack that, but overall the uptime feels a bit short to me. Regardless, we are going to take Resonance Cascade, and we're going to put 2 points into it that we can carry on to the next section here. We're also going to put 3 of 3 into the action skill, although I do recommend actually taking this one first, so I would put 3 of 3 into Confirmative Reality first, and then getting the Resonance Cascade, 2 of 3. You will need that, as you see, to jump to the next trait here. If we only have 3 of 3 here, we do actually have to put 2 points somewhere, so I do recommend putting it in there. Next up here for prioritization, I do recommend getting Excited State, as this one is going to go ahead and increase your crit damage, and we actually do need an ability here, so we're going to go ahead and take Nuclear Winter. By the way, I did forget to select that one, but we'll take Nuclear Winter. It is on the top here. Then we're going to put 505 into the Ricochet Refraction here so that she can gain the Ricochet chance when she entangles enemies. And again, I have a class mod here. These I actually do recommend trying to get with a class mod because they are on the 2nd tier. And you see, we could technically take it here. We actually could go more into it and put 2 here and 3 here if you don't have the class mod. That's what I would recommend doing. But for right now, I do have it, so I'm going to put 5 of 5 into this one. What these are doing is essentially giving you some shield recovery here and some health recovery. Again, I would try to recommend getting these on a class mod or figuring out another setup there if you can, as you more than likely are going to need some points into these two. You might be able to survive with just the accretion, but I do recommend also trying to get disruption function, as that's going to give you some good survivability. Last up here on this side of the things, we're going to take Group Study as always, and then go back into our Nuclear Winter. That did get deselected when it went back. Now, next over here, we will come back into the left side of the tree and get 5 of 5 into Decoherence, and we're also going to take 5 of 5 into Feedback Loop. That here gives us, whenever we entangle an enemy, which we're constantly doing, whether with our crits or with our Nuclear Winter, that's going to go ahead and give us action skill damage. Yes, you are considered an action skill, even though you're proccing this on yourself with the Halo Group Study sidekick. You are now considered the action skill damage, so anything you do will be tied into that. This also increases your duration and action skill cooldown rate. This is very, very good here. This is going to help a ton overall and just has extra benefits, so it definitely is worth to take. Again, here's where you might go into the overshield stuff. I really wouldn't take this over that, so that's why I do avoid this one entirely, but that's completely up to you. Next up here is another one that I really like to take, and this actually pertains to a weapon that I'm using. In order to get it, in order to get critical funding, we actually do have to put 5/5 into this one. I recommended this in my last build. I still recommend this one overall because you'll entangle enemies with crits, and even though there really isn't a lot of downtime with your weapons anymore, or at least with your ultimate, with popping your flux generator, even though it's a Halo skill now, or the group study, I still recommend putting 1 into here, but this is where you could get 6 points to slot somewhere else. We do have to actually put 7 points into this one right now, because with a specific weapon, we need 2 ammo to recharge. I'll explain in a minute here what that exactly is. We have 7 points to toy around with now, and I do still recommend going into this one where we do increase our gun damage, as it is a ton of gun damage on the table there. And also the reason why is because our last 2 points can actually go into here for fire rate. Now I did a bunch of testing with this, and I found that fire rate is actually a lot better than anything else you can take, at least given what we have left. I have tried to put it in this one, which is the creative overflow, but the fire rate just applies 100% of the time during your action skill, so I would take this one every single time. Fire rate's going to put out more damage. That's also where you could take off this stuff if you wanted to and slot it more into the fire rate. And then if you even had more extra skill points left over, you could also slot into here for action skill damage. Get a few points there if you wanted to, but that's how you kind of universally tie around. Maybe I'll do a later build where it doesn't tie into this specific weapon, if I can find another weapon that actually does this much damage. But for right now, this damage from this weapon is pretty insane. Next up here, we'll go into what's happening with our gear. What we're actually using, this is going to be our main weapon with this. Why we ended up taking 2 into critical funding. As you see here, we have 2 in our ammunition slot. That is because we are currently taking the Panicking Hellwalker. For some reason, this weapon just does absolutely insane damage. I found things really close. I even found this AR here that does over 11,000 DPS. But still, for whatever reason, the Panicking Hellwalker outdamages it bar none. It outdamages pretty much everything else. But there's absolute insanity with this weapon. Again, we are proccing crits constantly, so we are refunding that 2 ammunition. That's why we took that, because if you don't, you'll only refund 1, and you actually will drop in damage. Now, you won't have to reload, but you will drop in the damage there because you're only shooting out 1 pellet per instead of the 2. Now, you will have to reload, so your reload rate does matter here, but you reload so quickly, it doesn't really matter. However, with the proccing of critical funding, it's going to infinitely reload that, so you won't have to reload. It's going to just give you the ammo back. This won't happen every time, but you do get pretty good procs on bosses, as you have plenty of chances to actually refund the ammunition. It doesn't seem as high with 15% chance, but with a shotgun, it actually is. And again, it's pretty much the only reason why I would recommend going with this build is with a shotgun, at least into critical funding, as we could slot it other places and could even get more damage into our overshield stuff. Now, again, if with overshield, if you are taking that side of the build, that's going to be a bit different here with these skill trees. You're going to want to go into creative overflow and even into latent charge. I would still recommend not getting main sum. I don't think it's needed. However, again, critical funding works really well with Hellwalker, and you're probably going to want to use this weapon as it's just absolutely destroying right now. But again, any other build does work. This does still work with any other weapon. You don't have to go into the creative overflow build. You also probably want a rep kit if you are going to use that. As you see, we can pop that in there. But it only lasts a few seconds, but that's where we get the vampiric, or the one where we kind of are generating shields. See, it's not too long uptime, especially if you are constantly getting hit. That's our gear mostly. Everything else, I actually don't recommend taking the class mod. I know a lot of people are using this one. You regenerate your skill cooldown so quickly, I feel like it could actually kind of bugs it out a little bit. So I actually don't recommend this one. And the status damage only applies, or stasis damage rather, only applies when it is a non-boss mob, as they have to be in stasis. And a lot of times it actually takes the mob out of my line of sight, so I don't like it. But you're more than likely if you want to use this one, go ahead. For right now, I am taking something that gives me a base of 19 damage percent dealt increase, and it's also giving me those lifesteal charges there in that armor kit, as I mentioned earlier, their armor regen. Everything else is kind of just around the bout here. You can look at it. Nothing else matters too much. It's all personal preference, aside from this grenade. You're going to need this one if you're also taking the radiation portion of my build, as that's going to proc radiation. The actual cool thing about this here, I think a lot of people were confused about, is that yes, it does say when you irradiate an enemy, she'll gain a stack, which this one goes up to 50%. And then in combination here, this one will actually jump all the way up to 80%, because every time she deals radiation damage to an enemy, she'll increase action skill damage. Again, you are considered an action skill, so your gun damage ties into this one. And it does feel like a bit of the damage is bucketed, meaning that if you have sources from different areas, it actually does help. The reason why I like this one is it actually doesn't matter per enemy. So the buff actually applies to yourself and not to an enemy. So you can generate off mobs and then use this on a boss. It is very strong in my opinion, and I do like this portion of the build. So again, the only other item that might be required is this one, or another way to do radiation damage. at least to get your stacks up. Everything else doesn't matter too much, although I really do like the Barrage Generous Fireworks Shield. This one's very good. I used to have one that had Power Booster on it, so every time you pick up those little orange packs, it would actually boost your damage. Still been trying to get one, but I can't find one as yet. I would still use this one no matter what. It seems like the best shield in the game so far. I'm also taking here gun damage and shotgun damage increase with the Jacob's License part, gaining a 40% chance to ricochet non-crits, because you'll still hit non-crits, especially when you're not in your ability mode. But for the most part, you are hitting a lot of crits. It still ties in well, as you see the shotgun damage and gun damage do help significantly there. Jumping over to our specializations, there's nothing too crazy here. I haven't finished this just yet, as I only level 48 on my specialization. But I still recommend going 20 into Brute, 10 into Sharpshooter, and then we're going to go 20 into this one. And then I would jump back to 20 into Sharpshooter. You will notice these actually do DR the more they get down. So here we're going 0.61%, where here it's 0.54%. So it does DR the farther you get into this tree, and eventually will lower and lower. I've seen most people take everything else, but these are what I would focus on right away, as I'm more than likely going to want to get this one, which is the one shot. That's the excess damage stored, will be 100%, so I'll apply this one eventually, so we'll get even more damage there. And then I also want to snag this overcharge one, which eliminating an enemy with a critical hit will cause them to explode, dealing skill damage, and that's 50% of the hit. So I do want to try that one. I do think that one's going to be really good as well. The ones I'll get rid of are Contamination and more than likely Compounding Afflictions. I will kind of swap around with these. This one, maybe I won't take. I'll still take Compounding Afflictions, but I'm definitely going to get rid of this one, as we don't really need a status effect application chance. We're already pretty good on that. Everything else isn't really that good, though, unless you want the fight for your life ones. Other than that, though, I would for sure take this one. There are a few others we could look into later on, but I'm still optimizing everything. This one might have some funky stuff here. It says action skill damage now benefits the increases to gun damage, but that already applies to us. I'm not sure if the damage gets duplicate there. Again, we'll have to do some more testing when I do get further into the tree. Quickly here, I want to go over a rotation for any of those that are confused, kind of what we're getting here, the procking, how we're actually procking everything, especially with the radiation. So first off, we'll do a little test here going over Splash Zone, since he's the simplest and easiest. Okay, so first off here, of course, we're popping our ultimate Flux Generator, Halo, Group Study, whatever you want to call it. So we'll go ahead and proc that. Now we'll try to get a couple procs here. I normally like to have around 2 at least. You could probably get 3 in. I wouldn't suggest any more than that, because eventually it does kind of DR. We'll go ahead and pop our radiation grenades, and then we're going to aim in, because that's going to tie into our specialization. As you see there, we do some really, really good damage before we can even really get off a 4th one. You can, but while you're aiming in, it's actually going to pull you out of your aim. The reason why you want to be aimed in is actually because of one of your specializations that I'm taking here, which does say here, while aiming, the Vault Hunter gains increased gun damage and critical damage per second. Bonuses are lost over 2 seconds of not aiming, where you do get a 5% increase per stack here, up to a maximum of 5%. And you get a gun damage bonus and a crit damage bonus. So 25% across the board there. Now, eventually, you are going to get unaimed when you have to reload, as you can see, because of this weapon. A lot of times when you're getting those procs off, you'll be aimed in quite a bit, and you'll be able to get at least 1 to 2 stacks, potentially 3 stacks. And at that point, you're going to be doing so much damage because you get a bonus 15% on both of those ends there. So that's really, really good for you and very helpful. As you saw, we did proc our 2 grenades there to get that neutron decay, as well as our other buffs there. I like how these bounce around and they will home to enemies, and then they sit here and then also will kind of shoot out the little missiles, which do help a ton. So that's kind of the baseline of the rotation there. Hopefully you got it down. You are proccing your ultimate, or whatever you want to call it, Halo Group Study, and then on kind of cooldown, I'm kind of trying to pop that as much as I can. Again, 2 to potentially 3 stacks is pretty good there. You see now we have 2 stacks. You can try for 3 stacks, but I do feel like this is a little bit too fast. And at this point, you're more than likely the enemy should be gone. But you can proc a 3rd stack, as you are constantly increasing the duration by shooting other enemies. So especially if there's a lot of enemies, if you're fighting like a huge group of enemies, then I would go for the 3 stack. Although on boss fights, it feels a little scuffed at 3, but I do think you can toy around with that. Again, we'll have to find the exact optimal ones to go for. I do think at 4 stacks, it goes way, way too fast, so I would keep it around 2 to 3. Overall, that's about covered for today's video. Again, a lot of this stuff I did tie in. I saw a lot of people doing different builds. A lot of creators were kind of jumping on the bandwagon for this one, and a lot of them were doing a lot of testing in front of target dummies. But I do think it's best to test in combat. That's why a lot of my footage does come from there, and I do feel like this is the best, most optimized build. Overall, though, if you enjoyed it, if you have any questions, leave a comment down below. And until the next one, deuces.